Hello everyone, I'm Arabdha. You're watching Halborn Flash videos, and today's guest of the hour is HbarSuite, and we're joined in by Admortis and Topachi from the team. Guys, welcome to this chat, first of all, and tell us a bit about who you are and what you do with HbarSuite.
Thank you for having us on. My name is Admortis. I'm the Decentralized Operations Officer for HbarSuite, and I'm one of the co-founders. Topachi is the Decentralized Chief Executive Officer, and he's also a co-founder. And we also have another co-founder called Topachi, who is a Decentralized Technical Officer. We make up the three founders of HbarSuite. So what is HbarSuite? HbarSuite is a suite of DeFi services built on top of the Hedera network. The team has developed a technology that could potentially replace smart contracts in the near future, the smart nodes. So in a few words, smart nodes are highly customizable programs that are deployed inside of virtual images, which can be hosted and decentralized through local machines or cloud computing environments, for example, Google Clouds or Amazon Web Services. Their purpose is to create a decentralized network of services that could leverage the Hedera One functionalities, which are much more efficient and cost-effective compared to Ethereum-based environments.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for giving us a bit of context into that. I would definitely love to ask you a bit more on the smart node technology that you're using, and what are the key benefits or advantages of using this?
So if we do like the comparison between smart nodes and smart contracts, it may be easier. So if a smart node rejects a transaction or it fails for whatever reason, you won't spend any money at all because the transaction will never execute and will revert like contracts do. So if a contract fails to execute, you will still pay the gas fees instead, whereas with smart nodes, you won't. So by using the Hedera atomic transactions, there is no such thing as blind signature, like it happens with Hedera smart contracts. So when you sign a contract on a Hedera, as you do now, you never know what you're actually signing. Therefore, you have to trust the project. Because the contract itself is not open source to read, the ABI is not available. And the Hashpack Web3 wallet is only able to show you the contract details prior to signing. So when you sign a smart node transaction, instead, you know exactly know what you are about to sign for and what you're about to receive, all in just one atomic transaction. So every transaction is transparent even before you approve it. So smart node transactions can be as cheap as Hedera on a native layer, while smart contracts are much more expensive in comparison. So it could be like 5 cents compared to 1 cent. So it could be a 5x price difference.
Very interesting. So it makes the expense factor much more optimized, you would say. And does that also affect scalability?
That smart node transactions perform on the Hedera native speeds, which go to 10,000 transactions per second to hundreds of thousands with sharding, while Hedera smart contracts only perform between 200 and 300 transactions per second. So there is no limitations on what we can do with smart node technology as we run natively on the layer.
So better expense optimization, more scalability, faster, great stuff. Can I take a step back and ask you a little bit about the HbarSuite vision in general and maybe the overall product spectrum that you guys are building out?
So the long-term vision for the project is to be completely open source and decentralized, maintained by a wide community that embraces the potential limitless power of smart nodes. That's the long-term vision. We've built a zero slippage DEX and a DAO engine. We've got NFT staking, token manager, a multi-sig wallet converter, as well as a very unique NFT marketplace, which is coming out very soon as well. So there's certain things that we're proud of. And also the DAO engine will be whitelisted so other people can be able to use that feature as well.
All right, very, very interesting. What would you say overall makes the Hbar product suite and the ecosystem in general different from everything else existing out there?
I guess the major difference that makes HbarSuite differ from other Web3 products is that we are the first smart contractless DeFi protocol for one that has ever been created, to the best of our knowledge anyway. But we've also achieved zero slippage market maker algorithm called the Smart Rebalance Market Maker. So that doesn't exist on any other network anywhere. The fact that we have zero slippage is massive. So for example, in the future, if we can port over Ethereum onto the Hedera network and you can trade that with stable coins with zero slippage, you could effectively save thousands of pounds from that.
what made you, I think, build on the Web3 ecosystem in general?
We're building on Web3 as we're leveraging the Hashgraph consensus algorithm, which allows us to create a trustless infrastructure that is secure, fast, and definitively scalable, which allows us to integrate micro currency transactions, as the gas fees on Hedera itself are really low. But the vision behind why we built HbarSuite, I'll let Topachi talk on just briefly around the limited DAO.
Yeah, thanks. So the generic vision is that at the beginning, we will be deploying this infrastructure built on top of Hedera network that would allow people to eventually using our DAO engine to create votes and proposals and basically create their own kind of governance token. And alongside that, we're also deploying, for example, a token manager and NFT manager system where people will be able to create their own tokens. For example, whether maybe governance, utility, or any kind of use case. And this would also go alongside the DAO engine that we're deploying and also alongside the multi-sig wallet converter, because one of the biggest issues right now that we have on their network is that there is not a real feature that allows people to create a multi-sig account at the environment. So for example, if somebody wishes to create a project and a DAO, usually when you create a token, initially you have just an account treasury, which is a single sig. So in order to enhance trust for other projects in the community, this will allow to expand decentralization on the Hedera network. But the use cases in general, even if we're onto decentralized finance for the most part, the use case that the smart node technology that we have built are basically limitless and can go from a retail for retail use case and infrastructure and big conglomerates. And even, for example, something that I said some time ago, with our engine, you could be able to, for example, have an NFT that represents the position, for example, in a village or in a city where this NFT says that you live in this area, and therefore you, for example, have the right to vote on proposals that regard this certain area of your village or of the city. And the use cases can be really massive. And again, we chose Hedera because it's really cheap, fast, and really infinitely scalable with the sharding.
Yeah, and just to touch on that as well, as from a business use case, there are a lot of businesses in Web 2 that want to branch into Web 3, and I think the technology that we've created can help facilitate that and bring people over on a more secure network.
No, that's awesome, and that's very insightful, just also to understand why you're using the Hedera Hashgraph ecosystem in general. All right, we are Halborn, so we have to ask you about security. So can you tell us a little bit about your take on security in general, the strategy around, and what do you do to make sure your code base is absolutely safe?
Yeah, we have a really unique approach since we're a smart contractless, and the major factor that makes HbarSuite able to be really secure is that we are leveraging a multi-sig structure, which comes from Hedera network itself. So basically, Hedera is allowing us to create those virtual images where you have this programming logic inside instead of using smart contracts. And within those, we're able to create multi-signature or multi-signature groups. And with this way, you can have different groups of people that run their own nodes, but within those groups, you have other groups. So let's say you have 3 groups. So let's say we have one founders groups of nodes, and then you have perhaps certain NFT holders of groups, and then you have community nodes, right? So let's say every group has 100 nodes, 100 sign-ins in there. So what happens is, if one group reaches the desired threshold, let's say, for example, 51 out of 100 to make it easy, and you have the first group that reached the threshold, right? But you still have other 2 groups that have to sign. So you are going to need at least, let's say, another group, 51 people of another group, in order to activate another threshold. So to have, in this case, 2 out of 3. So it's a really nice infrastructure that we're building, because Hedera allows us to do this nested continuous multi-signature feature. And alongside that, we have what we call a proof of reputation system that goes with the multi-sig, where, for example, the node runners collect karma tokens. And
Right.
karma token is not a tradable token. It's basically a reputation token, and shows basically the performance that a node is running. Like, for example, if they try to like modify the code of a node, for example, or if, for example, they were offline for too long, they may not be reliable, they may receive like a negative karma tokens. They have a different balance until to a point where they could get automatically blacklisted if certain conditions are met. Yeah, it's a little more complex than that, but that's how I can explain it in as layman terms as I can.
Oh, thanks for that. That's definitely a lot of intrinsic checkpoints you have built in for ensuring security. I also wanted to kind of touch upon what are your views on having an external party such as us partner with you guys to review the security, and where do you see that of essence to the code-based safety in general?
Of course, like we've been happy with the security audit we went through Halborn, which this one was more of a penetration testing level, as like we're currently still closed source, but we're planning on going open source really soon. And in this case, Halborn, they help us a lot to make sure that there were not possible that no hacker could be doing like DDoS attacks or more certain kinds of attacks, or for example, like on our zero slippage decks, they were able to test our smart rebalance market maker algorithm. The team, Halborn team, also like try to create certain conditions for example, like draining liquidity pools, or create certain hacks that could be done like from the outside. But yeah, we made sure that everything has been solid. We fixed everything that Halborn was able to find, and eventually, like once we go towards the open source part of it, we would definitely like run more audits in order to make sure that our smart node infrastructure will be safe to be deployed to the public, to other node runners.
All right, awesome. That's great to hear. And to end on a more fun note, if you both could look back at your own journey thus far when building HbarSuite, is there something that stands out to you wish you could have known before?
Well, personally, it's been a great journey building on Hedera. There is nothing real, because like since Hedera is still a very early ecosystem, so there's some things that we have been building, we only could have done them like through like as we went, like as we're building, because there are still like features that are being deployed through Hedera slowly. So like 1 year ago, we would have not be able to build certain things that we have with the smart nodes until now, because Hedera is still like very young and it's slowly like growing and implementing certain features that for some features is really advanced and great, but for some others there is still like some work that needs to be done. But the really cool part about the smart nodes is that they basically allow users to use what Hedera network has already, but in an enhanced way. And we can bind like any kind of possible programming logic from the smart nodes through Hedera account IDs.
Thanks, guys, again for joining us in on this chat. To our viewers, if you guys have a question about HbarSuite or a comment on the community in general, let us know and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you.